When we fail, as in you, as in I, when I fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable to my boundaries or standards, I feel used and mistreated. And that is my fucking fault.
Moments with Puz, brought to you by Get Your Ass to Work, something that everyone can enjoy. Now on to the show.
This is the Get Your Ass to Work podcast, episode number 24. Today we're talking about feeling used and mistreated. So let's start off with this quote. When we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. I want to read this one again. When we fail, as in you, as in I, when I fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable to my boundaries or standards, I feel used and mistreated. And that is my fucking fault. That is not the other person's fault. It is not the other person's fault when I have failed to set boundaries and hold them accountable to those boundaries. It is not the other person's fault that I feel used and mistreated because I did not communicate my boundaries, because I did not hold them accountable. That is my fucking fault. Where do we see this? This happens in the world all the fucking time. Let's just start with a very common standard or boundary, and that is don't talk during a movie. Very simple. Most people get this. However, there is always somebody in there, not always, but every once in a while, there's going to be somebody, some kids, some adults, who are going to talk during the movie. Or they're going to talk or whisper a little bit loudly, and you are going to ignore it. And you're not going to want to be the asshole who says something and speaks up and says, hey, shh. Every once in a while, there is the guy in there who will say, hey, shut the fuck up, and makes it awkward. But you've got a boundary, and so does everybody else in the movie theater. But when you fail to hold that person who's whispering accountable, and you allow it to continue, here's what happens. You start to sometimes attack that person in your mind. You start to feel resentment. And then when that happens, you start to either say or think things about that person that are hurtful rather than actually addressing the behavior as it's happening. Rather than say, hey, sir, could you please be quiet? You start to get irritated. You let it build up because you have failed. You, not the other person who's talking. Not the asshole who's on their cell phone. You have failed to set the boundary and uphold the standard, and you are going to hold it in. You are going to hold in that resentment. The other person's not even going to know what's happening. They may not care at all anyway. But you are going to be the one who gets pissed off. It is going to change your attitude, and if you hold that in, the chances are you're either going to lose it in a way that is socially uncalibrated and just yell out at a movie theater, or you're going to have a miserable time at that movie because you have failed to say something. Now, where else does this happen? It happens everywhere. It happens with bosses. A boss lets one of their employees show up 5 minutes late one day. Next week, they show up 10 minutes late. They don't say anything. And then it's 15, and then it's a day off, and then it's a sick day. And they still just say, oh, it's okay. Oh, it's all right, you're having issues. But they fail to address their boundary and their standard of which they set out to do. It happens all the fucking time. And you know who the most guilty person of that is? Me. I do this constantly. And for people who know me and who have worked with me, and as hard ass as they think that I am, and for as hard as I am on my own boundaries and holding myself accountable, it's a whole nother story when you've got to hold another person accountable to your standard and your boundary. It's a whole nother ballgame when you have to deal with other people and hold them accountable. And I have failed at this at work. I have failed at this in my relationships. I have failed at this with friends, girlfriends, co-workers. All the time, I have failed to do this. And what happens is you end up building up resentment. And if you don't handle it and you don't take care of it, you will at some point attack this person, not physically, maybe verbally, maybe mentally in your mind. You're attacking this person, thinking bad thoughts. It's affecting your mood. It's affecting the way you speak to them. They can feel it because you have allowed it to build up within yourself. And then they do that one last thing. You know, like when someone's eating and they're just kind of being a loud eater, they're slurping or they're grinding their teeth, or maybe somebody's snoring, whatever, and you just let it go, let it go, let it go, and then you say a little something, let it go. Behavior doesn't change, and then one day you snap. Boom! You break out and you say some shit that you wish you didn't say, and it is your fucking fault. It is not the other person's fault that you did not hold them accountable to their standard. To your standard. These are your standards that we're talking about. And so really, you're the person to blame. You need to take accountability. And more importantly, you need to set the fucking boundaries and hold people accountable and make sure they know exactly how to be accountable. Make sure it is very fucking clear what it is you need, how to be accountable. This doesn't have to be fucking complicated. If you have accountability for your employees that they show up at 8 o'clock and they show up at 8:02, you let them know, hey, I noticed you were not here on time today. You're 2 minutes late. Ask them what the standard is. What's the standard? You're here at 8 o'clock. Have you agreed to that standard? Yes, you have. How do we fix that? Now, what happens when people don't hold themselves accountable to the standard? Is it your fault that they don't hold themselves accountable to the standard that you've set? And they have agreed to, by the way. I'm not saying you are forcing your standards on other people. That's a whole nother topic. We're not talking about the dad who's living his glory days through his son and putting all this harsh pressure on his son to perform. That's a whole nother topic. We're talking about a standard that you have that someone else has agreed to, and they're not coming through on their commitment to that standard. Whose fault is it? Is it your fault necessarily that they are not performing? It could be. Do they need extra coaching? Do they need training? What do they need from you? Ask them. Hey, what is it that you need? And don't ask them after they have failed 5 times and you're pissed off. You have to ask them when it's happening. What can I do to support you? How can we make this standard achievable for you? And what if they still don't hit it? Have you done everything you can do? Have you exhausted your resources in helping that person achieve and see what it is that you need them to do, that they have agreed to do? Have you done everything? If you have, then maybe it's time to let them go. Maybe at that point, then, when you have done every single thing you can do and they agree that you have helped them as much as they can possibly be helped, and they can achieve what it is you want them to achieve, maybe at that point, it's time to let them go. And at that point, when you do let them go, you may be doing them a favor, because keeping them on ensures that they are going to continue to fail. They are going to continue to feel bad about themselves. They are going to continue to disappoint you. They don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to feel bad. And if they cannot, after all the training and all the coaching, achieve what it is that you need them to do, they may even thank you at that time when you let them go. But there is a big disconnect between have you done all that you can do to help them and people jumping right to a conclusion. And I am guilty. I am the person who has offered very little coaching and training and has gotten frustrated with my employees when they do not perform. I fuck up constantly. And I have gotten this right, but so many times I've gotten this wrong, and I continue to get this wrong. Why? Why is someone like myself, who is so accountable to myself, able to get it so wrong with other people? And it's because it's an uncomfortable conversation to have with people. It is not comfortable when you have to hold someone accountable because you may get a negative reaction. You may not want to piss off your son or daughter because they're a teenager and their reaction could say, "Fuck you, Dad," and leave. And then you're going to be fucking worried sick when they walk out the fucking door because you pissed them off because they didn't hit their grades that they agreed to hitting, and you call them out on it and you say, "Well, guess what? No football this season. No motocross, no this, no that." And then they resent you, but really, they're pissed off at themselves for not doing what they said they were going to do, that they're going to take it out on you because they are not going to be accountable. And that's another point. When somebody says they're going to do something and they don't do it, and in turn, they start to get frustrated with you, questioning them on it. They are not taking responsibility for their outcome. They are blaming. And when you blame, you do not grow. You do not change. You do not take acceptance for what it is that you said you were going to do. And the result is not going to be achieved, and relationships can go downhill really quickly. And that is absolutely why a lot of people will not hold their friends, their spouse, their loved ones, their uncles, their mothers, their daughters, their employees accountable. Because they love them, they like them, they don't want to hurt them, and then they start to negotiate with themselves. And I have done this. I fucking do it, and I probably have done it today, letting somebody off because you care about them, and you let them off easy because it's more simple to do that than to take the hard road and spark up a conversation that could possibly be negative. It is very easy to let people off. It is very easy for people to let someone steal from them a little bit of money and not call them out on it because they're in fear for the repercussions. I see shit like this happen in the real estate world where there is an older person who has their son or daughter living with them who may or may not be the best person in the world, take some of their jewelry, take some money, take advantage of their social security checks, whatever. And the older person is not going to say anything because of fear that they are going to walk out and be left alone. There are serious fucking consequences. And if you are the type of person that holds people accountable, you are going to make some enemies. You will piss some people off. You are going to lose some friends. You may even lose people you love. They may not want to be around you because they know that you are going to hold them accountable to a certain set of standards, and they don't want that pressure. They don't want the pressure of the standard. And if they don't want it, that's okay. But if you're a boss, you cannot let that be okay, because then you are the person who gets resentful of the other person until it will end up bad. Very rarely is somebody who's not accountable start to be accountable. It doesn't happen often. It will happen. So not everybody who starts off not being accountable to what they say they're going to do ends up not being accountable. There are some who turn it up. There are some who dial it in and become stellar. More often than not, it's the other way around, where people are very accountable when they start a new job. They are very accountable when they start a new relationship. They are very accountable to a new friend. They are very accountable when they get a brand new car to keeping it clean. They show up to work on time the first month. We see this happen day in and day out everywhere we go. And what happens after month 2, month 3? People are very accountable to their workout program. People are very accountable to their diet week 1. Week 2, a little slip. Nobody is there to watch them. If you are, and you don't say anything, are you actually helping them? Absolutely fucking not. You are hurting them. You hurt people by not holding them accountable. I guess this is the tough love shit where you have to hold people accountable, because letting them slide on their goals and their dreams is absolutely going to hurt them. And it's so much easier to just let that shit slide and just let it go. And to not say anything to a son or a daughter who's pissing you off because you just don't want to deal with the negativity that could come from it. But that negativity, you are kicking that fucking can down the road that's going to multiply times 10 when you constantly let the person off the hook, and then all of a sudden they're 40 or 50 years old with fucking no job and have never done anything, and they've got to move in with you because they got nowhere else to go, and you didn't hold them accountable to starting that community college, going after a new job. There's a million examples. I'm going to turn this to the other side now. Now, we have our standards and our boundaries that we hold people accountable to in our daily lives. At home, we hold our wives, we hold our husbands, our kids to a certain standard. Whatever it is, there is a standard. But what about when other people have a standard for themselves and you let them slide on it? So their standard is, or their goal, whatever, is, hey, I'm going to quit smoking. And they quit, and a week or two goes by and they start back up. I'm going to lose weight. They lose 2 pounds, then they put on 5. I'm going to start this workout program. They make the gym the first week, and then they start to let it go. That also is going to build resentment within you. And then you know what? You do not trust that person. So people ask, how can I be trusted? Here's something. First, be trustworthy. Be truthful. Tell the truth. And then act. Do what you say you are going to fucking do. Every time. If you say you were going to be somewhere at 4 o'clock, be there at 3:55. If you tell someone that you are going to be able to finance them for college, you tell a son, a daughter, hey, I've got you on this. Get it. You better find a fucking way. And do it every single time. That's how you build trust. That is how people will start to believe you. And then they will stop holding you accountable because they don't have to. They're not going to be looking over your shoulder to make sure that you're not fucking around. That's how husbands and wives don't check each other's cell phones, because they know exactly why their husband or where their wife is at a certain time, because they said that they were there, and they were. And they have proven it over and over. And they said, hey, I'm going grocery shopping tonight, and they went grocery shopping. I'm cleaning the house. The house was clean. I'll meet you here at 6 o'clock, and they were there early. People, that goes a million miles further than just saying, I'm trustworthy, and I would never do that to you. When you actually perform, and you tell somebody what you're going to do, and then you go out there and do it, there you go. That's trust. Now, when you don't, and then when people critique you on it and you get mad, say you're going to quit smoking, say you're going to quit drinking, say you're going to save money, and you don't do it. I'm going to pay my rent on time every fucking month from now on. And you don't do it the next month. Okay, look, you didn't fucking do it. Get back on the path. Do it. But you cannot be mad when someone calls you out on it. Own it. Own the fucking mistake that you made. And tell the other person. Communicate it clearly. I fucked up. Here's what I did. Here's what I'm going to do about it to move on. Boom, you're back in trust. When you fucking deny it, or you get mad, or you say, just leave me the fuck alone, I'm going to take care of it, you use up your capital. your wife capital, your husband capital, your son-daughter capital, your employer capital. And we all have so much of it. And you can only use it when you have built it up. So you paid your rent 23 months straight on time. You slipped by a day on rent. You paid it the next day. Nobody really got mad, but you used up some of that capital. Now, you don't pay it the next month on time. Now you're really paying out of your capital that this person is going to trust you again. And trust can be built and trust can be destroyed quickly. So quickly. It only takes one action. Depending on that action, depending on what it was, you can destroy it, years worth of trust, in a moment. And who's responsible for that? Well, you can decide, but my obvious choice is me. I am responsible. Now, what if you're doing everything perfectly and someone still doesn't trust you? Well, then you better set a boundary and you better set a standard and hold that other person accountable to your boundary and your standard. So you want to go out and you want to do something with your friends once a week and you don't necessarily like being interrogated when you get home about what you did, who you were with, and what you were doing. You feel like you should be trusted? Should you be? Okay. Have you proven time and time again that you should be trusted? Okay. What if they still don't trust you? Are they impeding on your boundary? If the answer is yes, it's time to have that conversation and do everything you can do to move that on, to get back in line, to gain the trust. And if you still can't do it, maybe it's time that if the person still doesn't trust you, there's something deeper going on. Look to find what's deeper, and if it doesn't reveal itself, maybe you need to let that person go. Or that person is going to define your standard. Because you do not get what you ask for, you get what you tolerate. And if you tolerate that behavior, that is the behavior that you will get. So when standards aren't hit and you let it go, you now tolerate it. And if you tolerate it, you cannot expect to get anything better out of that person. You cannot expect to get anything better out of yourself if you tolerate eating fast food while you're on a diet. You get what you tolerate. If you get anything extra, congratulations. Consider it a fucking cherry on top of the ice cream. So this goes both ways. You have standards, the other person has standards. They may be different. If your standards are too high for someone and they can't meet them, they may start to resent you for having such a high standard. And then you have to make a decision. I'm either going to tolerate them coming at a lower standard, or I'm going to move on. And I can't say that there is a right or wrong. There may not be a right or wrong to going either direction, depending on the situation. But one thing will happen is if they are not hitting your standard and you start to tolerate an action that you are not okay with, that you have not compromised, that you have not talked about allowing, and you allow it and you start to feel the resentment, it's going to break that relationship down eventually. Eventually, they will use up all the capital that they have earned with you, and you're going to explode. Eventually, you will no longer be able to listen to your husband snore at night, and they will have used up all their capital, and you are going to have a shitty morning. You're going to wake up and be like, you fucking snored all goddamn night, and I couldn't sleep. You go to the doctor. And then there's going to be some resentment coming back from the other side saying, well, fuck, whatever. They may or may not do anything about it. And like the guy in the movie theater, you're not going to say anything, and he's talking or he's on his cell phone, and you hated your fucking movie and then you're pissed off. That's your fault, guys. Set the standard. Communicate the standard. Hold the standard. Hold other people accountable to the standard that you have set. Is there some gray areas? There may be from time to time. Can there be a little bit of sway? There should be. Not in every situation can you hold the standard 100% of the time. You have to be a little bit flexible in certain areas on some things. When it comes to safety issues, you may not be flexible even one bit. On other issues, it may help you to be a little bit flexible. And in some areas, it may help you to be a lot flexible, as long as the resentment does not start to build up. You guys, thank you once again for tuning into this podcast. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate your feedback. I do see some of your comments on Facebook. I think it's awesome. And as you're being accountable and you're holding other people to be being accountable, get back to work.